today's eye makeup look, I'm going to show you how to create this look using two eyeshadows. One for the lid and one for the crease. It's a super easy look, so let's get started. So I've already started by priming my eyelids with a little bit of primer. If you don't have an eyeshadow primer, you can always use concealer and a setting powder. This will create a blank canvas for you to work on. However, primer does give your shadow something to hold on to. So that's why I prefer primer over concealer. I'm first of all going to take that crease shade, which is a matte tone. And I'm going to take my blending brush. So you only need two brushes for this look, a blending brush and a flat brush. Starting with the blending brush, we're going to work this over and back into the crease of the eye. So the crease of the eye is where the eye creases into the eye shape. We're going to start on the outer corner and blend this over and back in this area. And I like to keep my eyes open so I can see the shape that I'm creating, making sure the depth of color is right at the lower point of the crease, blending upwards towards the brows and pretty much disappearing as it gets to the brow area. Take your time blending this over and back until you get the depth of color that you want. And then I'm going to take my lid shade. And whenever I'm applying anything that has a little bit of shimmer, I use a flat brush to apply it. The reason I use a flat brush is it helps the shadow to glide on, particularly with metallics or anything with shimmer or glitter. It just helps them to really hold on to the lid and glide and create that nice glossy look. You want to very slowly build this up, applying a little bit of shadow at a time until you get the depth of color that you want. You also want to pay close attention to the lash line because this is where you want the majority of the shadow to be, blending upwards until it reaches the crease. If you have harsh lines between your crease and your lid, take your brush and slowly smudge between the two. This will help them blend into one another. But don't be afraid to keep blending and applying a little bit as you go along. And I also took that lid shade and applied it underneath the eyes as well. I accidentally ended up applying liner. You might ask me, Sinead, how do you accidentally apply liner? It's because I had a little bit of eyeshadow on my lashes, went to remove it using liner, hit my lash line, and then ended up having to do a very thick line. It's a bit like that meme where you go to do a really thin line and end up super dramatic. That's basically what happened to me. Rather than cutting it out or starting again, I just thought, let's just embrace the mistake. With so many products being shown on screen all the time, it can be tricky to know where to start. So I thought that I would talk you through some of my top 10 must-have products for beginners and the basics that you need in your makeup bag to create any makeup look. Also, I want to break it down a little bit because there's so many different things being thrown at you when you're a beginner. So I've broken it down into 3 different groups. Group number 1 is your moisturizer, foundation, concealer, and powder. Group number 2 is your bronzers, blushes, and lipsticks. And group number 3 is your mascara, brow gel, and eyeshadows. So let's get started with group number 1. Your first must-have product is your moisturizer. So your moisturizer is the last step in your skincare routine, which then becomes your first step in your makeup routine. Your moisturizer gives your makeup something to hold on to. Even if you're using powders, you have to apply a moisturizer first to help even out the texture and give you a better long-lasting finish. But I would recommend waiting about 5 minutes after you apply your moisturizer just so it has time to fully absorb. And if your skin feels wet after 5 minutes, you're probably over-applying. Blot off the excess and just use less next time. Before we get into it, I want to talk a little bit about makeup and creating a blank canvas. No one has perfect skin all the time. We all have redness, breakouts. It's totally normal. Foundation and concealer is used to cover these imperfections. However, I don't like to think of it that way. I like to think of them as bringing out and enhancing other areas. Creating a blank canvas so that your eyes show up more, your face shape, your lip shape. It's not always about covering. Sometimes it's about using something to cover which then enhances something else. Which brings us on to must-have product number 2, foundation. For beginners, you'll often hear recommendations of tinted moisturizers, BB creams, CC creams, because apparently these are supposed to be easier to apply. However, that's not exactly true. BB creams, tinted moisturizers, they're sheer and lightweight, which is why they're easy to apply. But that's only comparing them to full coverage heavy foundations. There's lots of foundations out there that are lightweight and sheer as well, and foundations are available in more tones, shades, and finishes compared to BB creams and tinted moisturizers. So you're guaranteed to find the right one that's going to work perfectly for you. So the basic rule to finding the right foundation is to note these 3 things: texture, tone, and shade. So the texture is your skin type. And when you're picking out a foundation, it's a bit like picking out a shampoo. If you have dry hair, you go for a moisturizing shampoo. Thin hair, volumizing shampoo. And it's the same with foundation. You have dry skin, illuminating foundation. Oily skin, mattifying foundation. Then you have your tone, which is your undertone. This is cool, warm, neutral, olive. But people often confuse the undertone with your shade, which is from light to dark. So you want to take these 3 things into consideration when you're picking out a foundation and also a concealer. In order to get true coverage, it's best to use a foundation and concealer that work well together. Your foundation is there to be used on larger areas to even them out, and your concealer is then there for the smaller areas that need more coverage. Must-have product number 4, setting powder. Now for beginners, I would actually recommend using a pressed powder, but it is totally up to you. Setting powders seal everything in place. They create a uniform texture all over the skin because foundation and concealers, they can set at different rates. And setting powders create a shine-free base that the rest of your powdered blushes and bronzers will easily glide over the top of. So that's group number 1. Moving on to group number 2, bronzers, blushes, and lipsticks. So must-have number 5. Bronzer. I want to talk real quick about the difference between contour and bronzer. Your contour is a matte shade, always matte, a dull, shadowy-like tone, and it's used in the low point of the face to emphasize the bone structure. Bronzer, however, can be satin, matte, or shimmer, usually more of a vibrant, warmer tone, and it's used on the high points of the skin. Basically, where the sun would hit the face, that's where you apply bronzer. For beginners, I would actually recommend using a pressed powder in about 1 shade or more darker than your skin. That way you can use this on the high points or the low points. Perfect if you really don't know what you're doing. Must-have number 6, blush, and must-have number 7, lipsticks, go hand in hand. Sometimes it can feel impossible to figure out what shade to use, but if you pair these 2 together, it will make it so much easier. So here are my 3 tricks for picking out the perfect lipstick and the perfect blush. Match the lips. Use your bare lips as a guide and basically mimic this in your blush and your lipstick. And then you can just adjust it, going brighter or lighter, depending on the look that you want to create. But using your lips as your first guide. Mix and match. If you have a lipstick that you love, maybe it's a bright pink, try then going for a more muted pink on your cheeks, or a coral cheek, a coral lip. The only time you don't want to do this is when you're wearing red because you can kind of look like a clown, but I do have a video coming up really soon on how to actually wear red, but mixing and matching your shades will help to bring the entire look together. And the last one is to match your cheeks. So run around or very lightly pinch your cheeks to see what color they go, and then try and get a lipstick and a blush to match that color, and there you go, perfect shade for you. Moving on to group number 3, we have mascara, which is pretty self-explanatory, though I'd love to hear what your favorite mascaras are, so definitely leave a comment. And then we have brow gel. I always think for beginners, brow gel is probably the easiest thing to start off with because filling in your brows can feel a little bit too much at times. Start off with a clear gel, move on to a tinted, and then you'll eventually get used to how you want your brows to look. And must-have product number 10, eyeshadows. So you really only need 3 eyeshadows to create a look, and I talked about this last week. You need a light, you need a medium, and you need a dark. And they're kind of your basic starting points, and then you can add around those. But I would recommend for beginners to start off with neutral shades, then move on to green tones, purple tones, but start off with a nice neutral basic palette just so you can get used to using eyeshadows.